I am really excited today because I'm going to read two books back to back. So the first book is The Three Little Pigs. If you already know the story of The Three Little Pigs, I hope you'll still join for this one. And this one is a reading or the text interpretation by James Marshall, who I already did a reading of Hansel and Gretel at the request of a student. And, and then I'm going to follow it up with one of my favorite books of all time, The True Story of the Three Little Pigs. And when I used to teach U.S. history a long time ago at a school in Michigan, I would read both of these books to my 11th grade students because they're very important when you're learning about history, even when you're in high school. So let's get started. We're going to start with The Three Little Pigs by James Marshall. The Three Little Pigs, James Marshall. James Marshall, a Caldecott honor winner for Goldilocks and the Three Bears, is witty and wily once again as he enhances The Three Little Pigs with ingenious details that will delight readers of all ages. Take a confident wolf, whose favorite food is pig, give him good lung power for huffing and puffing, and a very healthy appetite. Add three little pigs who live in houses made of straws, sticks, and bricks, and you have a worthy successor to Mr. Marshall's award-winning Red Riding Hood and Goldilocks and the Three Bears. The inimitable James Marshall will have readers gobbling up the Three Little Pigs too in his latest and funniest book yet. The Three Little Pigs, retold and illustrated by James Marshall. And this is from 1989. I know that because of this title page information that I zoomed in on when I paused the video to know that it was 1989. Once upon a time, an old sow sent her three little pigs out into the world to seek their fortune. "Now be sure to write," she said, "and remember that I love you." The first little pig met a man with a load of straw. "I know," said the little pig. "I'll buy your straw and build a house." "That's not a good idea," said the man. "Mind your own business, thank you," said the little pig. And he bought the straw and set about building a house. It took him no time at all. Very soon a lean and hungry wolf happened by. Pig was just about his favorite food in the world. So he knocked on the door and said, little pig, let me come in." To which the little pig replied, "No, no, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." This annoyed the wolf to no end, and he said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." "Go right ahead," said the little pig. So the wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house in, and he gobbled up the little pig. The second little pig met a man with a load of sticks. "I've got it," said the little pig. "I'll buy those sticks and build a house." "I'd think twice about that," said the man. "Oh, pooh," said the little pig. "What would you know?" And he bought the sticks and went to work building a house. "Very pretty," he said. No sooner had the little pig settled into his pretty house than the wolf happened by. He was still hungry, and he said, little pig, let me come in." To which the little pig replied, "No, no, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." The wolf didn't care for that at all, and he said, "I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." "Ha, ha, ha," said the little pig. So the wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he blew the house in, and he gobbled up the little pig. Now the third little pig met a man with a load of bricks. "These bricks will make a fine sturdy house," said the man. "Capital idea, my good fellow," said the little pig. So he bought the bricks and set about building a house. It took him quite a bit of time, but it was well worth it. "Nice and solid," said the little pig. "Nice and solid." But no sooner had the little pig moved in than he noticed the wolf loitering about. And the wolf, who was still hungry, said, little pig, let me come in." To which the little pig replied, "No, no, no, not by the hair of my chinny chin chin." Well, the wolf had heard that before, and he said, "Then I'll huff, and I'll puff, and I'll blow your house in." "Oh, don't do that," said the little pig. But the wolf huffed, and he puffed, and he huffed, and he puffed, until he was quite blue in the face. The house stood firm. "I'll try another approach," muttered the wolf, and he put on his most dazzling smile. "Little pig, I was only teasing," he said. "By the way, I hear tell that Farmer Jones has the most scrumptious turnips. Shall we go pick a few?" "Oh, I'm much too busy now," said the little pig. "What about tomorrow morning?" "Excellent," said the wolf. "I'll come for you at 6." The next morning the little pig got up at 5, hurried off to Farmer Jones' turnip field, picked a basket full of scrumptious turnips, and dashed back home. When the wolf arrived at 6, the turnips were already boiling in the pot. "Sorry, I couldn't wait," said the little pig. The wolf tried not to show his displeasure. "No harm done," he said. "By the way, there is a lovely apple tree down in Merry Meadow. Shall we go help ourselves to a few apples?" "I must cook my turnips," said the little pig. "Let's meet there tomorrow morning." "Splendid," said the wolf. "Shall we say at 5?" The next morning the little pig was up at 4 and went off for the apples. It took longer than he'd expected to reach Merry Meadow, and while busy gathering apples in the highest tree, he saw the wolf approaching. "Do try one of these," he called down, throwing an apple as far as he could. When the wolf chased after the apple, the little pig shimmied down the tree and made it safely home. The next day the wolf came again. Really, he was quite put out. "There's a fair today on Hog Hill," he said. "Would you care to go?" "Why don't we meet there?" said the little pig. "Would 3 o'clock suit you?" "Colossal," said the wolf. 3 it is. Just to make sure, he would be there at 2. At 1 in the afternoon the little pig went to the fair and had a fine time, so fine that he lost track of the hour. Suddenly, out of the corner of his eye, he saw the wolf coming up the hill. Without a minute to spare, the little pig jumped inside an empty butter churn and rolled down the hill toward the wolf. Well, the wolf was so scared, he ran all the way home. That evening the wolf went to the little pig's house and told him how frightened he'd been by a great round thing that came down the hill. "Frightened you, did I?" said the little pig. "That great round thing was a butter churn, and I was inside." This was simply too much for the wolf to stand. "I've been nice long enough," he cried. I'm going to eat you up right now. And he climbed under the roof. When the little pig saw this, he put a big iron pot in the fireplace and quickly stoked the fire. "Here I come!" cried the wolf. "Dinner time!" "You can say that again," said the little pig, and he cooked the mean old wolf and gobbled him up. That is the end of that one, but stay tuned just a moment and we will switch to the true story of the Three Little Pigs. So now we have here the true story of the Three Little Pigs, as told to Jon Scieszka and illustrated by Lane Smith. As told to Jon Scieszka, he's a pretty famous author. Who is it by? A. Wolf. This kind of looks like a newspaper. Daily Wolf, The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf, as told to Jon Scieszka. Let's see. The True Story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf, as told to Jon Scieszka, illustrated by Lane Smith. And this was published in 1989, which is in this information right here on the copyright title page of the book that I zoomed in while we were paused. Everybody knows the story of the Three Little Pigs, or at least they think they do. But I'll let you in on a little secret. Nobody knows the real story because nobody has ever heard my side of the story. I'm the wolf, Alexander T. Wolf. You can call me Al. I don't know how this whole big bad wolf thing got started, but it's all wrong. Maybe it's because of our diet. Hey, it's not my fault wolves eat cute little animals like bunnies and sheep and pigs. That's just the way we are. If cheeseburgers were cute, folks would probably think you were big and bad too. But like I was saying, the whole big bad wolf thing is all wrong. The real story is about a sneeze and a cup of sugar. This is the real story. Way back in Once Upon a Time, I was making a birthday cake for my dear old granny. I had a terrible sneezing cold. I ran out of sugar. So I walked down the street to ask my neighbor for a cup of sugar. Now, this neighbor was a pig, and he wasn't too bright either. He had built his whole house out of straw. Can you believe it? I mean, who in his right mind would build a house of straw? So, of course, the minute I knocked on the door, it fell right in. I didn't want to just walk into someone else's house, so I called, "Little pig, little pig, are you in?" No answer. I was just about to go home without the cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. That's when my nose started to itch. I felt a sneeze coming on. Well, I huffed and I snuffed and I sneezed a great sneeze. And you know what? That whole darn straw house fell down, and right in the middle of the pile of straw was the first little pig, dead as a doornail. He had been home the whole time. It seemed like a shame to leave a perfectly good ham dinner lying there in the straw, so I ate it up. Think of it as a big cheeseburger just lying there. I was feeling a little better, but I still didn't have my cup of sugar. So I went to the next neighbor's house. The neighbor was the first little pig's brother. He was a little smarter, but not much. He had built his house of sticks. I rang the bell on the stick house. Nobody answered. I called, "Mr. Pig, Mr. Pig, are you in?" He yelled back, "Go away, Wolf! You can't come in! I'm shaving the hairs on my chinny chin chin!" I had just grabbed the doorknob when I felt another sneeze coming on. I huffed, and I snuffed, and I tried to cover my mouth, but I sneezed a great sneeze. And you're not going to believe it, but this guy's house fell down just like his brother's. When the dust cleared, there was the second little pig, dead as a doornail. Wolf's honor. Now, you know food will spoil if you just leave it out in the open. So I did the only thing there was to do. I had dinner again. Think of it as a second helping. I was getting awfully full, but my cold was feeling a little better, and I still didn't have that cup of sugar for my dear old granny's birthday cake. So I went to the next house. This guy was the first and second little pig's brother. He must have been the brains of the family. He had built his house of bricks. I knocked on the brick house. No answer. I called, "Mr. Pig, Mr. Pig, are you in?" And do you know what that rude little porker answered? "Get out of here, Wolf! Don't bother me again." Talk about impolite. He probably had a whole sack full of sugar, and he wouldn't give me even one little cup for my dear, sweet old granny's birthday cake. What a pig! I was just about to go home and maybe make a nice birthday card instead of a cake when I felt my cold coming on. I huffed, and I snuffed, and I sneezed once again. Then the third little pig yelled, "And your old granny can sit on a pin." Now, I'm usually a pretty calm fellow, but when somebody talks about my granny like that, I go a little crazy. When the cops drove up, of course, I was trying to break down this pig's door, and the whole time I was huffing and puffing and sneezing and making a real scene. The rest, as they say, is history. The news reporters found out about the two pigs I had for dinner. They figured a sick guy going to borrow a cup of sugar didn't sound very exciting, so they jazzed up the story with all that huff and puff and blow your house down, and they made me the big bad wolf. That's it. The real story. I was framed. But maybe you could loan me a cup of sugar. There we go. Isn't that story so much fun? I love that version so much. So can you guess why? If I was teaching United States history, why I would read The Three Little Pigs and then read the true story of the Three Little Pigs by A. Wolf. One version, another version. So have you thought to yourself for a little bit why I like both of these stories and why they'd be important for U.S. history class? If you haven't come up with anything yet, pause this right now and go talk to someone about it. See if you can get a discussion going about this. And I'm going to go and give you one of my examples. But if you're not ready for it, pause this before I give you just one of my examples. Okay, so if you're ready to go on just for a minute or two here. There is a lot of information about when we sent men to the moon. John Glenn. One Giant Leap for Mankind, Apollo 11. Here's a website from NASA, a Lunar Science Conference. Look at the people here at this science conference. The crew was Neil Armstrong, Edwin E. Aldrin, Michael Collins. 1969. I remember this. That's how old I am. My dad took me outside because it was telecast on the news. There were only 3 channels back then, by the way, on the TV, and you had to get up and change the channels. But it was being broadcast on all of them, I think. And we had a whole bunch of police officers, because my dad was a police officer, over, and their wives and families. And he pointed up at the moon after they'd landed on it and said, "Do you see him? Do you see him up there on the moon?" And I said, "Yes, Daddy, I see them." I remember so well watching this on television. And there's lots of things in museums. The Smithsonian National Air and Space Museum in Washington, D.C. There's all sorts of information about how this remarkable thing happened. Nothing like this had ever happened before. And there are incredible documentaries. And there are movies about the space program. But the one thing that has never been really highlighted was the contribution of African American women. Without them, the program never would have gotten off the ground. Maybe you're familiar with this cover right here. This is taken from the movie Hidden Figures, and the movie is in large part accurate, about 75% accurate, but it's based on a book that was really well researched. The never before told true story of NASA's African American female mathematicians who played a crucial role in America's space program. Before Neil Armstrong walked on the moon, a group of professionals worked as human computers, calculating the flight paths that would enable these historic achievements. Among these were a coterie of bright, talented African American women. Segregated means kept apart from their white counterparts. These colored computers used pencil and paper to write the equations that would launch rockets and astronauts into space. Moving from World War II through NASA's golden age, touching on the civil rights era, the space race, the Cold War, and the women's rights movement, Hidden Figures interweaves a rich history of mankind's greatest adventure with the intimate stories of 5 courageous women whose work forever changed the world. Women. No women are represented here. No African Americans are represented here. It's important to find out the other stories that are not being told and to get other people's sides of the story. And I tried to tell all of my students, always. You may have heard one side of the story, and everyone is sure that the wolf is the bad guy. But before you really make a determination, you should at least get the story from the wolf's side. Now maybe the wolf really is the bad guy. Maybe you won't believe the story. After all, we do know that wolves eat animals. But the pig that built the straw, he didn't exactly protect himself with a house made out of straw. Do we really fault the wolf for that? Because the one who built out of straw and twigs was a bit lazy? Now, just because you're lazy doesn't mean you should die. But wolves do eat pigs. So shouldn't the pig have known that and maybe protected himself a little bit more? There's lots of different things to discuss when we look at 2 sides of a story, multiple sides of a story. If you haven't already, someday you're going to have to learn a lot about World War II. A lot of our history is about learning about wars. And just look at the immediate pictures that all pop up here. We get a lot of the soldier story, which we should. It was a war. But what about the stories of those left behind? What about the stories at home? What about the children? What about the stories of the soldiers who they fought against? Just because their government sent them to war does not mean that the soldiers wanted to fight any more than our soldiers actually wanted to fight. What other stories? What about the African American soldiers? What other stories are there to be told? So that's why I like, and even use in high school, these two stories. Plus, Jon Scieszka is amazing, and the story is amazing, even if you don't use it for talking about perspectives in history. So that's it. Moving on.